through 2018. And without significant duties going on out there, he is available to be a part of our show every week, and it's a lot of fun catching up with him. So we'll get up with him. Coach, we got you.
Yes, sir. Ready to go.
Man, I tell you what, always good to hear from you. And, last week we talking about this Clemson-Georgia game, a marquee game, to go from one of the top billings in college football to play an SC State here this weekend certainly has a different feeling. But, Clemson's wanting to get back to work. We've heard that theme all weekend. You've been a part of wins and losses as a coach in your career. I mean, when you have a tough one like 10-3 against the Georgia Bulldogs, I mean, what does it mean to this team to get back out there tomorrow afternoon against SC State, in your opinion?
Well, they'll want to play well, and that was going to want them to play well. And from that, I'm talking about, offensive line assignments on who to block. They might have been a little confused versus Georgia as far as, who to block. I know Georgia is kind of dominant from a pass rushing standpoint, but Clemson would just want to go out and play well. I think they will. A lot of it's got to do with the competition. A lot of times, though, when you play somebody like South Carolina State, your players will come out there and not take them very serious. They won't be focused, might play kind of sloppy because of preparation. I don't see that in this case, simply because Clemson doesn't lose a lot of games. And when they do lose, it's easy to get their attention. So I don't think it'll fare well for South Carolina State in this particular instance.
Coach Tommy Bowden with us here on the program on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. You can expect him here throughout the college football season. And, Coach, that matchup this past Saturday was old school. I mean, that was the way it once was. Games back in the day were 13-7, and that was a normal occurrence. And a 10-3 final score with no offensive touchdowns. The first time that's actually happened in a game at Clemson since, I believe, back in 1982, ironically, in the game between Clemson and Georgia. All that being said, I mean, how what were your takeaways from that contest that took place last Saturday in Charlotte?
We touched on a little bit offensive line, but I don't know if you remember. You might have slept through my comments on the Georgia game last week. I mentioned the key. I thought was going to be Clemson's defensive line over Georgia's defensive line, and not very much. They're both good, but I think Clemson will perform a little bit better. And then Brent Venables. Brent Venables, he was as advertised. He shut Georgia out. Though you had to swing the domination of the Georgia defensive front over Clemson. I thought that was the difference in the game, because we kind of touched on it last week. When you have a dominant defensive front, not only do you affect the running game, you affect the passing game with sacks and pressure on the quarterback. And I think you saw that in both phases of the game for Clemson. A lack of a running game, and then always behind the chains, because DJ was either sacked, going off his back, making a move off the spot, going under pressure, throwing guys in his face. So I think that was the key in that game was Georgia's defensive line, and it affected. For the first time, Clemson was a little discombobulated offensively, and I haven't seen that very much out of a Tony Elliott or Jeff Scott offense.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Tony Elliott, because I was going to ask you, I can only assume that in the early stages of your career, the conversations as offensive coordinating staffs went was, you got to be able to, at least we always heard in the media, you got to be able to run the ball, to establish the run, and then that way you could, throw the ball downfield. That was sort of the way things went. But this game now is so open offensively. Is it different now, in your opinion, for coaches? Because a lot of Clemson Tiger fans would say, hey, kind of like you just mentioned, Tony Elliott, who you know very well from being a player on your team when you were there, they would say Tony Elliott abandoned the run in that game. And how difficult is that in this new era where, teams really do try to stretch the field vertically, maybe to set up the run now in this modern era?
Yeah, there's no doubt. If you look at Nick Saban, the transition he has made from a defense run action pass game, and now shotgun, a little bit of fast pace on the ball, throwing it downfield a bunch. Those were good talking points 20, 25 years ago. The game has changed, and the passing attack is so instrumental. Now, whether you throw the ball to set up the run or run to set up the throw, more so now it's throwing the ball to set up the run and have complementary runs off the drop back passing game, screens, draws, bubble screens, things like that. So yes, the game has changed, and it's pretty much you better be able to throw the ball more effectively than run the ball. I think we mentioned last week Clemson was last year 11th in the conference in rushing, but they were, I think, second in the ACC in total offense, over 500 total yards. So the running game's important, but not nearly as important as it used to be.
He is, of course, your former Clemson Tiger head coach, Tommy Bowden. He's the man that brought Dabo Swinney to Clemson, and certainly the Clemson Tiger fans have reaped the benefits of this incredible run. 6 straight trips to the college football playoff. But, if you listen to some media types out there, now I've been all week, Coach, I've been telling people, man, you got to pump the brakes on all the panic. I mean, we got a long football season ahead of us. I don't know why I got to be the level-headed guy in the room. I always like to kind of be the outlandish guy in the room. But when you look at it, I mean, what does that loss mean for Clemson moving forward? I mean, anything? Is it of supreme significance in the college football playoff run? Too much college football season remaining? I mean, how do you see it as somebody that's been on the sidelines?
They'll have a hard time, I think, Clemson getting in with another loss. The only thing is they're going to be favored in every game. They probably won't have another loss. This doesn't happen very often at Clemson where you lose a game, especially one like this. They've won so many big games on national TV and against a quality opponent. But where this hurt, I say hurts, but the ACC just took a terrible beating over the weekend with Miami's loss and North Carolina's loss and Louisville's loss, and you can go on down the line. Duke's loss to Charlotte. It took a beating, and unfortunately for the ACC, the flag bearer is Clemson. And when Clemson takes a stumble, the ACC takes a stumble, and unfortunately, a lot of other teams stumble other than Clemson. So as far as national prestige, it hurts a little bit in reflecting negatively on the ACC. But Clemson, they'll get in the playoffs again. They've lost one game. I don't know if they can get there with 2, especially if the ACC does not appear to be a strong conference, by the middle of the season or by the end of the season, where an ACC loss would really, really hurt you if the conference overall is not very strong.
Yeah, it was a tough weekend, and the other one you got to include too, Georgia Tech losing to Northern Illinois 22-21. Not exactly jumping out of the gates over there in Atlanta. And, I can't remember if I asked you this last week, but now that you kind of went into the ACC, when your dad was the head coach at Florida State, I mean, they were pretty much dominant. I mean, it was very similar to what we've seen from Clemson's recent run of success. Was there a bunch of conversation back then? And if we talked about this last week, say we already did, because I know I've kind of touched on it a little bit here on the show, but, was there the conversation out there that's just Florida State and nobody else, and they're not going to respect the team that your father had assembled down there during that incredible run?
Well, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. I just think now the media is a lot more not investigative is the wrong term. They really dig and unpeel the layers of a conference and teams, a lot more so than they did when my father went into the ACC initially with Florida State. It wasn't that big of a deal because Miami, of course, wasn't in the ACC at that time. Florida State was kind of they were not so much the Clemson of the ACC. They were dominant in college football, much like Clemson is, dominant in college football along with the ACC. But the talk wasn't nearly as prevalent back then about Florida State. You're carrying the whole torch for the ACC like Clemson has to do now.
Coach Tommy Bowden joining us here on a Friday afternoon, getting set for Clemson's matchup, 5:00 kickoff tomorrow against SC State. Let me ask you, Coach, about DJ Uiagalelei. I think you look at his body type. He reminds me of Taj Boyd, and throughout, whether it was Chad Morris's tenure there as the offensive coordinator, whether it was Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott, the running game for the quarterback has really been an essential part of what they've done with Taj Boyd, with Deshaun Watson, Kelly Bryant, a little bit even with Trevor Lawrence a year ago. But more so than maybe even Lawrence, to me, DJ looked apprehensive about running the football, almost like he wants to showcase his arm in the pocket. Is there anything that you can do as a coach to get a kid to be maybe a little bit more aggressive in taking what the defense is giving him? And is that something that Clemson fans should probably expect to see from DJ over the next couple of weeks on the ground?
Yeah, I think there'll be a tremendous learning curve for DJ from week 1 to week 2. And a lot of it, like you say, he's a young guy. Trevor Lawrence just finished, a generational type quarterback, number 1 draft pick. I'm sure DJ had thoughts of sitting in the pocket and throwing the ball and running being really, really secondary on his mind. Whereas Trevor, through his experience, Taj, through his experience, Deshaun, through his experience, would tuck it a little bit quicker than what he did. Did he hold on to the ball a little bit too long? Sometimes, yes, he did. And there are probably opportunities where he could have tucked it and ran sooner than he did. But I think you'll see it won't be a true evaluation versus South Carolina State, but I think you'll see tremendous growth in his ability to make quicker decisions, either running or throwing as the season goes along. And he is really, really young, and I think his potential in both those areas, when to throw it and when to run it, is going to really increase a few weeks.
Now, you mentioned Brent Venables and that defense. Do you remember the first time you saw a Brent Venables coach defense or any coaching conferences where maybe his name was sort of at that time sort of a rising star? Do you have any recollections of him very early in his coaching career?
Yeah, we might have discussed this. I tried to hire him one time. Did I tell you when we went out and visited Oklahoma?
No, I don't think so.
We took the school plane. They were getting turnovers. I really wanted to increase our defensive turnovers. Oklahoma at that stage, Brent Venables was leading the nation. I think Michigan maybe, and I called maybe Lloyd Carr might have been at Michigan at the time, but called Coach Stoops, said, listen, I want to come out and just watch your practice, watch your defense. I took a couple of defensive coaches, and then I sat and met with Bob Stoops for about 2 or 3 hours. My staff went and met with the defensive staff. And then when they got ready for player meetings before spring ball, Coach Stoops says, well, where do you want to go? Do you want to go watch quarterback? Do you want to go watch wide? You want to go in the quarterback meeting? You want to wide? Whose meeting you want to go into? I said, well, let me sit in Brent Venables' meeting. And I sat in there in the back of the room in Brent's meeting. And then I think I called him maybe the next year. And just to show you how focused and how concentrated he is, I don't think he returned the call. But, I had him pegged along with Lincoln Riley as an offensive coordinator. Neil
Wow.
Brown, head coach, you always keep guys on the short list if you lose somebody. I remember Lincoln Riley was on there. He was just having tremendous stats offensively. Neil Brown, head coach. West Virginia was another one. And then Brent Venables was on my short list. They ever lost a guy. And, I've been aware of him for a long time and been a huge fan of his.
Well, and it's funny because, I think you look at some guys' coaching tenures and, they skyrocket immediately to become a head coach at some program, probably much faster than they used to. But then you also have these guys like Brent Venables that I feel like has kind of found his niche in the sport. I think he really appreciates the defensive side of the ball. From doing interviews with him, I think he's glad he doesn't have to do the Tuesday media sessions and all the media availabilities that come along with being a head coach. I'm not saying he's not capable of it, but I just feel like he's at home as a defensive guy. And quite frankly, while everybody's always saying, hey, who's going to be the team to hire him to be the head coach? I'm not sure he just won't stay at Clemson. I mean, it's just a good gig, and he's well compensated.
Well, he is. Like you said, Dabo's obviously a good guy to work for. Dabo is an offensive guy. Therefore, he's not, he's probably not going into Brent Venables' office every 30, 45 minutes and try this. I want you to try this. That makes a pretty good working environment. Brent,
I've been drawing a couple of things up, Brent.
Yeah, well, you just have a lot. But so Brent's probably like that freedom and that comfort zone he has with Dabo. He's well compensated. There is going to be probably a point in time where he's going to want that challenge. a guy that's a competitor like him, and really his standard is so high defensively, he's eventually going to want to challenge himself as a head coach to see if he can duplicate that as a head coach as opposed to just as coordinator. The time's not right for him, but I think it will be maybe when his son gets out of college or high school or something like that. He's relatively young. And as we all know, the objective in coaching is not to be the youngest head coach, but the oldest head coach. So he's got time.
Well, the salaries they pay head coaches these days, you just go take that job for a couple of years. If you don't like it, it was like you worked 5 or 10 more years as an assistant. Again, exactly. Coach Tommy Bowden. Coach, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much, and certainly look forward to catching up with you next week before Clemson takes on Georgia Tech. That's always an interesting series, given how tightly contested it was when you were there at Clemson, and I can't wait to dive into some of those memories with you as well.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Coach Tommy Bowden. Incredible, man. When he said about going to Oklahoma, I vaguely have like a recollection of that. But what I don't recall was, any of the stuff that he would have been, going to, talk to Coach Venables and then maybe even calling him the following season to bring him in. And how about the revelation about Lincoln Riley? Head coach at Oklahoma. That's pretty impressive because Lincoln Riley, I mean, heck, man, he's young now. I mean, Lincoln Riley's 38. So if you go back, he would have been like 26, maybe. Lincoln Riley, I guess back then would have been a wide receivers coach at Texas Tech, maybe. Man, now there's some intrigue. Unless I misunderstood what Coach said, I may have, but there's a little talking point for the old water cooler on Monday morning, huh? If you missed it, go check the podcast, the archives. And if you're watching over on YouTube, you got 2 great choices here. Subscribe, hit that one over there. That's the subscribe button to the left of me. Stay with us.
Now, Columbia Traffic, sponsored by Pope Davis Tire and Automotive, home of the best tire prices in Columbia, guaranteed. Fox Sports Radio.